Hey everyone, Austin from Lift to Life Garage here. Appreciate you tuning in. In today's video, we are going to be doing an overview of a 6-inch suspension kit on this 2019 F-150. All right, so currently right now you're looking at some before pictures of the truck before we decided to do the lift. It's sitting on a 2-inch leveling kit in the front and some 33-inch tires, so it's pretty close to stock. However, we are going with the BDS 6-inch coilover suspension kit. Okay, this involves obviously new cross members, new coilovers for the front. It's going to involve a 5-inch block in the rear with some new shocks and everything along those lines. Now, I do want to preface this video. It's not an actual step-by-step video. It's mostly an overview, but I do some discussion around taking the front end apart. We look at the new brackets for the front of the suspension, and then I walk you through what's needed to be done in the rear in order to get the lift, and then we'll finish with some pretty cool before and after pictures so you guys can see the end result. So we'll go ahead and we'll just jump right into it. So getting the front end kind of tore down, all right, in order to tear the front end apart, in essence what you have to do is come in. Obviously you're going to remove your caliper, 2 caliper bolts here on the rear. You're going to disconnect the sway bar, which I have already taken off the vehicles on the ground, from this top bolt here. Disconnect these 2 bolts and remove all your brake lines and everything like that, as well as the one from the frame side right up here. That way you got some play and wiggle room there. Disconnect your vacuum line. Come up front here, remove the tie rod bolt from the knuckle itself. Make sure you pull out your ABS sensor, disconnect that, pull that out. And then from here, I'm going to remove these 2 bolts on the top and the bottom. That'll allow me to pull off the knuckle. Also took off the dust cap and a little bolt from there that holds the CV axle to the knuckle. So go ahead and get this. Continue to pull the part. Once you get the knuckle off, loosen the 3 top hat bolts for the strut. Remove the bottom 2 bolts on the strut, which are right down here from the lower knuckle. Then I can take the lower control arm and upper control arm out. And then from there, we're going to come and we're going to remove the differential and get that all unbolted, drop down, and then I can start cutting on the lower end here. Cut the tabs off, get the new cross members thrown in, and get it all thrown back together. All right, I've gone ahead and dropped the differential down out of the truck, and this frees up the area of which we need to cut. So this bracket is the driver side rear cross member mount. Okay, you can see where the factory cross member bolts in on the 2 holes on the left hand side of the screen. The yellow marks indicate where I need to cut this bracket. Now what I did is I cut the bracket. I started with a cutoff wheel on the bottom, front and rear, and then I transitioned to a sawzall to kind of make sure I had a straight line going up and across the top. Now, BDS provides actual measurements of what you need to do in order to make these cuts. The front is pretty easy. It's just straight up the front of the bracket. The rear side of the bracket, you have to kind of make a jog left as you go up closer to the frame side or outside driver portion of the vehicle. Now, make sure that you do have a minimum of the BDS suggested measurements when cutting. There is a very, very tight bolt that the differential mounts to that tucks in right up in there, and I'll show you guys that later on in the video. All right, now I have the differential back in the truck, as you can see. So what we're looking at here, this is the driver's side of the truck. The left side of the photo is the front of the vehicle. So I'm in essence standing in the driver's side wheel well looking at the cross member. Okay, now we're going to start off up top here. You can see the new differential drop bracket for the driver's side. That is kind of the little curved bracket there. What that does is that lowers the driver's side of the differential down 6 inches. So usually that mounts 6 inches higher up onto the truck. Since we are doing a 6-inch lift kit, that differential drop bracket lowers the differential down 6 inches on the driver's side. There's also one on the passenger side, which I will show you in just a little bit. Secondly, you can see we have a new brace support for the differential that butts up right against the new rear cross member. All right, now we are looking at the driver side rear cross member with the differential mounted up into it, as well as on the left-hand side of the photo, you're going to be able to see the new sway bar drop bracket. So again, this drops your sway bar down 6 inches since we're doing a 6-inch lift. I will disclose that BDS does supply new grade 8 mounting hardware, which I removed the factory hardware after I took this photo and put in the grade 8 nuts and bolts to mount this sway bar drop bracket. You also are getting a back side of the rear cross member here, so you can see the rear cross member, the new rear cross member. You can also see where I did cut the factory cross member and why it is important to make sure you jog left in that cut. As you can see, that bolt is very, very tight in there, so I even could have afforded to cut a little bit further left on that towards the outside of the vehicle to gain clearance for that. I had to put the washer behind the actual cut, and then the bolt was actually able to pinch up on that. And then you can see the driver's side lower control arm hanging there from the rear cross member. Okay, now we are shifting over to the right side. So now we are looking at the passenger side of the vehicle. Here we have our passenger side sway bar drop bracket. Again, 6 inches because we did a 6-inch lift. You can see the passenger side of the new cross member located here. And you can also see where the original factory cross member mounted to on that bracket. You do not have to cut anything on the passenger side. The new cross member drops or fits right up in there. And then you can also see the lower control arm on the passenger side hanging there. All right, here we can see the passenger side of the rear diff drop bracket. That is mounted with a little S bracket that you see here to the front side of the rear cross member located here. This is a brace for the passenger side of the differential drop bracket. And this is just a side view of that S-shape brace between the passenger side differential drop bracket and the rear cross member. This view is from looking at the passenger side wheel well into the center of the vehicle. All right, and then to wrap up the front of the truck, the only thing that was left to do for the cross members was to install the new front cross member, which you can see here. You use the factory lower control arm bolts to mount this to the old control arm pockets, and then BDS supplies new cam bolts, which you can utilize to for the cross member, the lower control arms getting that mounted there. And then you can also see the provided skid plate from BDS that gives your differential some protection from any off-roading, rocks, anything like that that you might see. Okay, now that we have the cross members installed, it's time to put the front end of the truck back together. So what we're looking at here is the passenger side. I installed the new coilover, mounted that up to the lower control arm via 2 nuts that mount to the factory mounting point of the factory strut. You can see I have in here the reservoir mount, which is just held on by the 3 top hat bolts for the top of the coilover. And then I also have the new upper control arm in here as well. So from here, what I would do is I put the knuckle back on, kind of reassembled, reattached all the brake lines, put new rotors on the truck as well, and then kind of went through and torqued everything down. Also the outer tie rod, I attached that to the new knuckle as well. Once I got the wheels and tires mounted and put back on the front, it was time to move to the rear. Alrighty, so just wrapped up the installation of the rear blocks. Pretty straightforward. Basically what you have to do is you have to come in here and loosen this bolt, which is obviously the brake line attachment to the frame there. Going to need to lower down the axle, and loosening that bolt gives you the slack that you need in there. That what you're gonna have to do is on each side, you'll come in and you will remove the U-bolts. You can do that by taking out the 4 bolts on the bottom here. You're gonna remove your factory shock, top and bottom, and you can pull that out. And then what you have to do, and it's a little bit of a process, so you have to pull out the factory pins, and BDS gives you actually a replacement pin for both the front and the rear. So I live in Chicago, lots of rust, as you can tell from this vehicle. It's a 2019 F-150. Helps if you heat up the bolts and then put some vice grips or something on the bottom of the pin, and then that'll allow it to spin it off there. So yep, took those out, put the new pins in, put the new blocks in, got everything tightened down, just hand tightened, and you want to torque everything on the ground. And then they also give you a relocation bracket, which is this little black, almost L-shaped bracket, which drops the mounting point down for the brake lines, gives it the extra extension needed for the new blocks. And then obviously I put the new shocks back on, so those are ready to go. The Fox 2.5. Alrighty. Now that I wrapped up the rear, it was time to mount and balance the new wheels and tires. Decided to go with the 37-1250 Nitto Recon grappler, wrapped around an 18-inch fuel covert wheel. So this is a positive 1 offset wheel. I knew I wanted to run 37s without a crazy amount of trimming, so this was the option I went with. So got these mounted up, thrown on the truck, took the truck over to the alignment rack, got it aligned, and then we were good to go. So here's some nice before and after footage for you. Appreciate you guys watching, and stay tuned for the next video.